Hello and welcome to Raid Madness. I am Colred, and with me today as our expert analyst is my good friend MTGJedi. You've been a little bit under the weather, MTG, but I'm glad you're feeling better and you could make it here today. You're up for this? You're ready to go?
Oh yeah, good to go.
All right. So MTG is going to walk us through the Northeast region. That is the Dragon's Lair. We've got our 16 champions in this region. We're going to start right at the top with the number 1 seed matched up against the number 16 seed. Here we've got Runekeeper Dazdurk in the 1 seed and Phoenix, or Phoenix, depending on how you like to pronounce his name, in the 16 seed. First things first, MTG, what do you think about this 1 seed? RKD, I think some people might question whether he's ranked too high in this bracket. I happen to love this champion. Give me your opinion.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I am a big basketball guy, and I'm excited to do the bracket, the March Madness bracket, but with Raid champions. And yeah, I think this could be one of the most overrated number 1 seeds of all time. And this is the first time, but this is going to go down as a historic pick here, at least for me. I think Runekeeper Dazdurk is great. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think he can hold the clout. We might see our very first overturn. Number 1 seed knocked out in the first round. I could see it happening because Phoenix is great.
He is. He's really strong. He's got that A1 block revive, which everybody loves in Ice Golem. But his kit is actually better than that. What are the things about this champion that maybe people should know? If they pull him, what can they expect when they build him?
Well, he can service as like, I don't have a block buffs champion. Use that. He's not going to be 100% or anything, but he can fill that role if you don't have anybody else. But he's got great multipliers. You know, this is a guy who can do really good damage for you in Faction Wars or Arena, especially while you're coming up in the game. He's in a lot of people's Faction War 2021 teams, even. And I'm not sure that Dazdurk is. You know, I think he's great, but I think Phoenix is a comparable champion. I'm really interested to see what people pick on this one.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I happen to have a soft spot for RKD. I think he's a fantastic champion. If you pull him early in an account, he is the perfect support champion for Arena with that 25% turn meter fill and increase attack. He's also a cleanser and a healer. You don't always get both at the epic rarity on the same skill. Now, just a reminder to the viewers, these rankings came out of the player ratings in the in-game review system. So clearly somebody thinks that Runekeeper Dazdurk is a very good champion. What do you think people might be perceiving to rank him so high? You know, understanding that maybe he's not that strong, but why do you think people decide to put him at number 1?
That is a good question. It might just be the combination of the abilities work really well together. A lot of times, especially at the epic level, you have champions whose abilities are kind of spread out in their effectiveness. You know, like it's not really obvious where you would use them right away. And I think Runekeeper Dazdurk does have a good combination of abilities that it's pretty obvious where to use him and how he's going to help you.
Yeah, we've seen that before in the other regions where champions who are maybe a little bit more complicated to use or come online past the mid-game point are not reviewed as highly. And maybe that's because these reviewers in-game, the players who are reviewing these aren't all like the YouTube viewers, right? We are a smaller section of the overall player base. And maybe more casual players like champions that are simpler to understand and implement in your team compositions. So that could be a factor here. So if you had to make a call for your account, if you were a free-to-play account, say in the first 4 to 6 months of your account, which one would you pull?
That's a close call. I think I'm taking Phoenix.
Oh wow.
I think I'm taking Phoenix here. Yeah. I'm just gonna go out on a limb. I'm gonna say I think I'm taking Phoenix to overturn this number 1.
Do you think we're going to see a similar upset in the NCAA tournament? Could a 16 seed actually pull off an upset this year?
It's only ever happened one time historically, I'd have to see the bracket once it's out, but no, my guess is no. In basketball, this never happens like that.
Well, that means that that tournament is going to be very different from this tournament because we've already had multiple 16 seeds called in the first round by the content creators. So this is a trend we might be seeing here, a lot of 1 seeds going down early, which would not be historically, like you said, similar to the NCAA tournament. But okay, let's keep moving. Let's go down to the 2 seed at the bottom of the bracket here. Against the 15 seed, we've got Ursula the Mourner, who is a fantastic support, one of the best epic revivers in the entire game, up against Vergis, one of the OG, like, self-sustaining tanks who could really solo a lot of content. Vergis may have been power crept a little bit. There are more solo champions than there used to be in the game. What do you think about this matchup here? Is Vergis undervalued here, or does it matter even because Ursula is so strong, she's just going to walk away with it?
Well, let me first say I don't like either of these champions, which I do get a lot of flack for once in a while. Ursula has been like one of those free-to-play recommendations for Hydra from a lot of people, and I just find her very difficult to keep alive. Vergis, on the other hand, is a champion who's very good at what he's good at, but now these days I don't think that he even functions in that role as a necessity for most players. I think there's other champions, other strategies. So I find that Vergis doesn't really get built nearly as much as what he used to. So I like Vergis as a 15 seed here. I like Ursula as a 2 seed. And I think Ursula is the clear winner here. You know, as one of the best revivers in the game, she's definitely going to be good. No matter where you're at in your account progression, you're probably going to 50 or 60 her, even if it's just for faction wars. But she, as I said, she can be used in Hydra as well, among other areas in the game, especially if you need a reviver. With that being said, there's one little caveat that does go in Vergis's favor, and that is the early game. He is an absolute beast and a menace in Arena. And there have been plenty of times that I've seen him be very impactful for people. And one time recently, someone, probably me, may have been soloed by a Vergis against their whole team. Yeah. So I know that he is still very powerful early game, especially when you don't have like a normal damage dealer type of a build yet on your account.
Right. And I do think that, like you said, Vergis probably doesn't even really fulfill the same role he did, say, 2 years ago in the game. Yeah. But if you are really early in an account and you pull him, he can still serve that role for you for a while, right? Because you're not going to have a lot of better options. He can help you get past the Scarab boss. He can help you solo some bosses. He can be, like you said, a menace in early game Arena. So he can have some value. I think Ursula is better as you progress through the game. You already mentioned Faction Crypts, fantastic Faction Crypt champion just for the revive alone, and you can probably get a lot of value out of her there at 50. But another thing to consider, and something these ratings haven't considered, is Doom Tower, right? Doom Tower ratings aren't in the game, but there's something that the voters might care about. And she has an excellent Doom Tower speed aura of 24% and can do a lot of good work for you as you are trying to increase your progression through the Doom Tower floors.
Yeah, totally agree. Here might be a good point to interject also. Sure. If you would love to do some basketball brackets over on my channel, I will be hosting a March Madness tournament with the normal basketball brackets as well. Corrette, I'd love if you join if you have time. Absolutely. But everybody in the audience as well, I'll be covering that on my channel. You can message me in Discord or whatever, but brackets are great no matter what it is that we're comparing. This is awesome with the epics, but we'll be doing some actual basketball there too.
I've got to say, when I had this idea for this bracket, you were the first one I reached out to because I know that you're a basketball guy. Obviously, you were going to be following March Madness. So if you are like us and you love these bracket competitions, or maybe you just have caught the fever from this one and you want to do another one, the NCAA tournament is also going to be going on in March. Do they need to sign up?
Discord.
Okay, so it'll be posted in MTG's Discord. All the details over there. I will put a link in the description of this video to his YouTube channel. And yeah, go check it out. I would love to join, by the way. I haven't done a bracket in a while.
Okay,
So it'll be great. We still have to make the call. We said Ursula. Is that what we're going with, the 2 seed here? Ursula walking through to the next round.
Yeah, I think she's a lock.
So now let's go to the 3 seed. Now, Maneater is the 3 seed here up against Archmage Helmet. And this is an interesting matchup because neither one of these champions was actually in the bracket originally. Archmage was ranked like 70th and Maneater was ranked like 90th. And we had to bump both of them up, and they ended up in the first round being matched up against each other. I think Maneater probably deserves a 3 seed. I don't know. What's your opinion? Is a 3 seed too high for this champion, or do you think he landed where he belonged?
I think we should quick fix Maneater to that number 1 instead of Runekeeper. But no, yeah, I think he deserves at minimum a 3 seed, if not higher. And man, it's a shame that Maneater and Helmet are paired up here because they're both excellent top champions. I think maybe Archmage's rating is not as high as what we would have thought, just because he's locked in that Doom Tower. I know a lot of players take their time to start doing those secret rooms, and even though he's the first champion in there, sometimes you're pushing a year or more before you get him. So that could be a reason that he was, a little bit lower on the rankings. But with that being said, I don't know how he's going to beat Maneater here. I really don't. Maneater is such a game changer for so many accounts. And in addition to that, obviously he's, your clan boss beast. Right. But you can use him in so many areas that a lot of people don't realize. I did one of these free-to-play accounts a year or two ago, and I used Maneater in Spider, Faction Wars, Arena, like just everywhere. He was absolutely amazing, and you're going to get a lot more mileage out of him, I think, than Helmet. Even though Helmet is so good, just because he's locked in that Doom Tower. I mean, do you think that's going to be a big factor in the voting, is locked in the Doom Tower?
I do think that will be a factor because it may be that the viewers for my channel, I have a lot more free-to-play viewers and early game viewers. So many of them may not have even heard of Archmage Helmet, or they certainly haven't accessed him yet. Whereas everyone knows that Maneater, at the very least, is part of an unkillable clan boss composition. But like you mentioned, he is good in a lot of content. I think people don't realize how good his turn meter reduction is because it's actually a steal. So not only is it a 100% turn meter reduction, but he could potentially go back to back. Yeah. And that is just, it's so powerful in places like Spider or any boss fight where you can reduce the turn meter of the boss itself. And so I do think that, like you said, the combination of those factors, I don't see how Maneater doesn't go through this particular matchup.
And plus he smacks. Like, you build Maneater for damage, he hits. Yeah. Helmet, he's not going to be doing damage for you. He brings some amazing buffs. He brings really nice control. But for me, Maneater's got to take this one.
All right, let's move on to the 4 seed here. So
this one's spicy.
you're already anticipating. In the 4 spot, we have Duke the Pierce, and in 13, we have Gala Longbraids. Duke the Pierce is very similar in kit to Stag Knight, who is on the other side of the bracket and is a 3 seed. So that's interesting to see Stag Knight at 3 and Duke the Pierce at 4. I think most people would feel pretty comfortable with those comparisons. And then we've got Gala Longbraids here, who is a single target nuke. She just absolutely crushes in Arena. And she's actually used in even Platinum Arena. And I'm not a Platinum Arena player, but I know that you have been. Do you see her up where you are in terms of Arena still used? Or did she kind of have a heyday and now she's moved out of the meta?
So Gala's always been like a really niche, like free-to-play option in some high-level Arena content. But she is really amazing. A lot of, the majority of the people who play high-level Arena are not going to use her because they have other options. But she is one of my favorite champions. I really love her. And I never recorded the video, but she was definitely going to be on my must build for Cursed City champions list. Like, she's just been like soloing Curse City levels with almost no help for me, and she's really strong. But unfortunately, she is paired up with Duck the Pierced. You say Duke, that's my favorite basketball team. I'm okay with that. Duke Duck, you're just not gonna get around the fact that he is a very popular champion.
Yep.
And I do have him on my free to play account this year for the 2024 challenge, and he's been even better than my expectations. I have previously been pretty critical about him with the provoke ability because it doesn't hit everyone, but what I've noticed, especially early game, is it doesn't matter if it doesn't hit everyone. It hits most people, and that is enough to disrupt them.
Yeah.
And so I have been absolutely loving him on my account, and I know that he's a really popular champion, so I would expect him to take this. But are there any aspects of these champions that I'm missing out on, or what other input do you have about this matchup?
Well, I've been a champion of Duke for a while. I really like this champion. In fact, I've always debated whether he is better than Stag Knight or not. Obviously, Stag Knight has the slow on the A1, which is really hard to overlook. But the one thing I like about Duke is that you can actually continue to use him in Hydra because that provoke is not a hit. It's just placed. So he doesn't weak hit there. And so you have that. I think it's on a 4-turn cooldown. It's kind of a long cooldown, but you can use him as a backup provoker. And it doesn't matter what affinity the head of decay, or I think it's the head of decay, right? The head of decay is. He's just going to land that if you have the accuracy, which is absolutely great. Otherwise, I've never built a Gala long braids to 6 stars. I know that she hits really hard in arena because I've come up against her, and she does have that extra turn mechanic. But yeah, I would rely on you for that. Is there any part of her kit that we're missing out on?
She ignores a lot of defense. Like if you're gonna build her, you're getting like it feels like she has a Savage set built in, and then when you put Savage on her, it just feels like you're ignoring all of their defense. It's not true, but like she feels very easy to make as a damage dealer. But the problem is with her being void and her being underrated, there are not nearly as many people who have her built as Duck.
Right.
Duck, there's so many more people that have him built and that use him all the time than Gala. So I just think that's another tick another thing in his favor over her.
All right, so we've got the 4 seed called going through. I think that's probably the best call. Doesn't mean that the champions who are on the other side, are on the losing side, aren't good champions to build. And if you pull a Gala on your account, you should certainly consider her because of what you just mentioned. But again, I think in this particular matchup, Duke's going to be the winner here, probably. That's what I would expect. Let's move down to the next matchup. This is game 33, I think it is. And this is White Triad Naya against Mist Rider Dathi. So these are faction mates here. They're both in the Sylvan Watchers faction. We've got one of the very few Void Epic tanks. There aren't that many Void Epic tanks. Most of the tanks are an affinity-based champion, but White Triad Naya is actually Void. And then we've got Mist Rider Dathi. Talk about extra turn mechanics. He's got that down everywhere in his kit. What do you think about this matchup?
I think this one's going to be one of the closest calls. I bet this is like 53 to 47%. I bet it's really close for people because, in my opinion, White Triad Naya is very niche. And Mist Rider Dathi is more usable for most players. I think White Triad is harder to use, and he's more obvious to use. So I think the edge for me goes for Dathi. I think his kit is really good, and it's also really fun. I think some people, and myself included, there's a frustration level with White Triad Naya. Like, I built her, but I couldn't get her to work. Her AI is awful when you try to run her on auto. So I think a lot of those factors kind of bring her down, even though what she does is really powerful. So I would be leaning towards Dathi here for my side.
That's really interesting because we have a situation here. I think you hit the nail on the head. We have a champion who in Naya, whose maybe her ceiling is much higher. if you can
Yeah.
optimize her, if you can get her in the right composition, if you can figure out, the speed tune that you need, she can really enable a lot of powerful compositions. I will say one thing about her kit that can make her really nice in wave content is that A1 AoE slow.
Yes.
Right. That is very nice. And that's not complicated at all. You just go ahead,
No.
put her in a stun set, get her nice and tanky and fast, and let her be, a utility component of like your Doom Tower wave clears or whatever it is. And that can be really nice. I do like Mr. Ryder Dothy. I think he is a blunt instrument, just damage, just hitting hard. And like you said, really fun. So I guess the question here is going to be like higher upside or better, easier access to, effectiveness there.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's move on to the next matchup, which is, I think this is kind of interesting. We've got Miscreated Monster down here at a 6 seed. And if you go back, because you've been playing the game a long time, if you go back and think about where he used to be in terms of epic rankings, I think you could have potentially put him up maybe somewhere around like a 3 seed. But he has over time been, I don't think he's gotten power crept the way some of the other OG champions have. I think what's happened is we just talk about him less because he's been around for so long. And then we're up.
I think that's absolutely right.
And then we're up against Oboro here, who I have to admit I've never built. Have you ever built an Oboro? Because supposedly she can do some good damage.
Yeah, I have built an Oboro before, but that is another champion who can be tricky to use. She has a really powerful A1 with that. It's a decreased defense A1 if you meet the right restrictions. And they can be difficult to hit consistently. But if so, she can be powerful. Her kit is really unique and interesting with the veil mechanics and the self buffing. But I just don't think a lot of people have her built. The only thing that might be in her favor is that like Nub, when he was building his YouTube channel, covered her a lot for some of his Hydra teams. And so I think that in the Hydra community, that kind of made her a little bit known and seen. But like, how do you compete with like the player love for the OG Miscreated Monster? It's just like, I mean, he was the first best epic on my original account. I came up in the game using him, making all of my mistakes were with him. All of the mistakes that I made were with him. But he's so good that it didn't matter. Like, I had flat HP boots on him. Did not matter. He was good enough to compensate for that.
Right.
And so I think Miscreated Monster is underrated right now. I think the free-to-play challenge here, with people being able to choose him as a starter, Epic on their accounts, has brought him back into, oh, okay, well, yeah, I forgot about him, but yeah, he's still really good. What do you think about that comparison?
No, I think you're right. I've always thought that Miscreated Monster like somehow got lost in the shuffle. Like as time progressed, people just forgot how good he was, and he wasn't covered as much. But you're right that there are several content creators who chose him in the HH challenge, the free-to-play challenge this year, and they're doing really good work with him. My captain, YST, who was another analyst for Raid Madness, chose Miscreated Monster, and he's had a lot of success with him. So I do think that actually the 6 seed probably reflects a mix of strong votes from back in the day that are still in the rating system, and maybe a little bit less, high regard for him these days. And as a result, he's sort of in the middle of the pack. If he weren't walking into a Maneater in the next round, I would actually call him as an upset out of this half of the bracket. But I think potentially in the next round, I don't see, that's going to be a great matchup. Maneater against Miscreated. We'll have to see what happens there. But I think you're right. He's going to walk through Oboro. As good as she might be in Hydra, I don't think she's well known enough. And she's, like you said, harder to activate.
Yeah. I think if you're right, and Maneater gets that win in the first round, and Miscreated gets the win as well, that will be such an interesting matchup. But
it really will be.
If Archmage somehow beats out Maneater, and you then have Archmage versus Miscreated, that becomes a really interesting discussion between those two. because then they're, have some similarities in their kits.
Right.
I like all of that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it will be interesting if that happens. Like you said, I'm not sure that anybody gets past Maneater. In fact, I'm looking down at the bottom half of the bracket. I'm not sure Ursula gets past Maneater. We've got a lot of really good champions in this half of the bracket, but it just feels like Maneater's actually going to live up to his name, and he's just going to chomp his way through the competition here. We'll have to see. Yeah. Let's move down to the 7 seed. Now, we've got Dark Kale, another Doom Tower champion, who is absolutely fantastic. He's a very good champion. I think he is underrated in this competition, probably for the same reason that Archmage Helmet is, and that he's a Doom Tower champion. But this guy is an absolute boss killer. And then we're going up against Skaramis, who is a little bit of a newer epic to the game. I have to be honest, I haven't built mine out yet, but he was actually rated very high. He was actually rated in the top 15 or so, and we had to knock him down here to a 10 seed because I just don't have proof that he's as good as the ratings were saying that he was. So first of all, have you built a Skaramis? And if so, how good do you think he is? Where would you seed him in this field?
I wish that I had built a Skaramis. I really do, because I think he's a cool and interesting champion. I think when you look at his kit, he appears like there are a lot of other options you can put in that spot. And so people tend to not build him for that reason. That's my guess. I think he seems very good on paper, and I have been wanting to try him in Hydra. I even have him on the list of this Hydra team that I may or may not make a video on. But I think that he could be very good because his kit is cool. But I don't think when you're saying like he was rated that highly in game, that is absolutely shocking. That is absolutely shocking.
Yeah.
And I do not understand how even that many people have him built.
Right.
But to try to compare that with Dark Kale, I don't know. There's just a lot of videos out there showcasing Dark Kale and what he can do. Like any kind of competition with the content creators, if we can get Dark Kale, we are. Like, I know in some of the ones I've done, people absolutely abuse Dark Kale for ridiculous lengths. And Skaramis, I just don't think like he's gonna be as impactful as a Dark Kale. Certainly Dark Kale's harder to obtain. You gotta work pretty hard to get him on your account over time. But Skaramis, I think, is decent. I like this 10 rating for him. I think that was a smart decision. It makes it interesting, but you're right. I don't know what we could have done to justify him as like, a 3 or a 4 seed. That seems kind of crazy. I don't know. How do you rate this matchup?
I think it's a really interesting matchup. Like, if you want to nerd out on a discussion about two champions, this is one of the more interesting matchups, actually.
Yeah.
Because it's a tricky debate. I do think that you have sort of a recency bias, right? He's a relatively new champion, and that also means he has very few ratings. Right. So a lot of players who have been playing for a long time, they look at him and they're like, I've already got that stuff covered. I don't even need to build him. And as a result, very experienced players haven't been rating him. But if you pull him on a new account, he's actually very strong, right? Like you could build him out and he could be a cornerstone of your roster moving forward. So I think as a result, that's why maybe he's rated so highly. I think the 10 seed fits him. I like him in that spot. I would like to see Dark Kale inched up a little bit, but I think probably he's just suffering from lack of accessibility. But when you're talking about boss killing epics, there are a few champions who come to mind, right? You think about Whisper. You think maybe about like Farrakhan the Fat or Fane, like as really good like utility, boss killers as well. And then I think Dark Kale is in that mix, and he's really maybe the best poisoner in the epic rarity for that job. I'm not sure there's anybody better. The only one who really comes to mind for me is Venom Mage, right? Like he is on par with Venom Mage, and Venom Mage is a 3 seed in this bracket. So I think Dark Kale down at 7 seed, that's a big gap from dropping from a 3rd seed to a 7 seed. So I think he's a little bit underrated. So I think we're both taking Dark Kale here at the 7 seed. Yeah. And all right, so let's move on to the next matchup, the last matchup in the round, which is the 8 seed versus the 9 seed. I'm really curious about your take on this one. I think this is another really interesting matchup in this quarter of the bracket. We've got Lady Annabelle at the 8 seed and Royal Guard at the 9 seed. And I think both of these are potentially maybe just a tad bit underrated. They're both really valuable champions, completely different champions. And so why don't you give me your take on this matchup?
I think that Royal Guard is a champion that is going to be great for you no matter where you are in the game. I still find new uses for my Royal Guards, even as an endgame player. Lady Annabelle, I don't think is at that caliber. I think she's very good at the one thing that she does. And yeah, you could use her other places. I think, she's going to be maybe your key to beating Baumel. And that might feel really impactful, but that's probably the only place you're going to use her. Unless you just really need somebody to fill in some gaps. But then you're going to replace her everywhere else other than that. Whereas Royal Guard, like, you're going to use him in every dungeon coming up. You're going to use him in some dungeons long term. You can use him against any boss. He's just like so solid at what he does that it's really hard to compete with that. Like, I think 9 is super underrated for Royal Guard. He's been in the game forever, but like he's also been good forever. So yeah. I think Royal Guard is great, and to me, I would say that that's a clear favorite for him. But I don't know. Are you on the other side? Are you on the Lady Annabelle side of this one?
I agree with every single thing you've said about Royal Guard. I think he's a little bit underrated here. I think he's highly versatile. One of the more versatile, hard-hitting boss killers. Like you get a turn meter decrease, you've got a quad hitter, you've got a slow. Like you get all these things on top of that max HP nuke that he does, which is an AoE, so he's great in Hydra. I think he's a fantastic champion, and everybody who gets him early in an account should just build him because he's going to get stronger as the game goes. But what I've found recently is I built Lady Annabelle for Baumel a few months ago, and I didn't really think about her beyond that. And now that Cintranos is out, I've found she's cleared several stages of Cintranos solo for me.
Really?
Yep. And then I got her back in a Doom Tower. She can solo Scarab Boss really easily, no problem. So like she's starting to turn into like a Swiss Army knife. Like if I'm not really sure what to do in a particular fight, I'm like, let me just throw Lady Annabelle in here and see what happens. And almost every time she does great. And so just based on my recent experience, I'm starting to think she is undervalued in the community because she's so good at that one thing that everybody knows she does.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So I do think it sounds like you're going pretty hard, though, for Royal Guard. And I'm not going to gainsay you. I think that is a very good call. And I think out of the two champions, he's the much more accessible, and you can build him really early and not have to worry. You're just going to, like I said, he's going to keep getting better. All right. So we have now worked our way all the way through all 8 matchups. So this is where it gets really fun. Now we can start projecting into the second and third round. So looking at the top half of the bracket, we've got that Runekeeper Dazzlerk at the 1 seed. You're not feeling that. You don't even know if he gets out of the first round. We've got the strong Royal Guard call. We've got you are going with the upset with Mistrider Dathi, right? And then we've got Duke de Pierce in the 4th. Is one of these champions, like which one of these champions do you think comes out of this half of the bracket?
I think that Royal Guard is coming out of here ahead.
All right.
I do. Like when I look at this part of this region, I just think like who's gonna beat him? If anybody's beating him, maybe Duck is coming out ahead there. But I think they'll go head to head to come out. And I think Royal Guard is gonna take it because just like any other decreased defense champion, you already compared him to some of the other decreased defense champions. I think he's replaceable. Like if you don't have a Duck, you just go farm a War Maiden. Is he better than War Maiden? Obviously so, but you're just primarily using him for decreased defense. Royal Guard, that's a hard champion to replace on your account. He does a lot, man. So I'm picking Royal Guard to come out of there.
I like the versatility pick. I like the OG pick. I really enjoy that. That's fun. And I think that, players, again, we were talking about how Miscreated Monster maybe is a little bit overlooked now because he's an older champion. I think that can also be said about Royal Guard a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that these two champions are almost must builds if you pull them on any free to play account in, say, the first 6 to 8 months. And even after that, if you are struggling with the particular areas that they're good at. So, all right, we've got Royal Guard going through. And who does he meet up with? Is it the Miscreated Monster that we just mentioned? Is it Maneater? Maybe Ursula sneaks in. Who are you calling out of the bottom half of the bracket?
I think the bottom half is a lot harder to pick for me. I almost said Miscreated Monster is going to sneak out of there and they're going to meet up, but I really just don't know how you beat the Maneater here. Yeah. I think if there's going to be a lower seed coming out of here, it's because we have some really passionate people who love Dark Kayle. Because like the people who love Dark Kayle, they really love Dark Kayle.
Yeah.
At least from my experience. So I would say Dark Kayle could come out, but I think it's got to be Maneater. So I would be pairing up Royal Guard and Maneater, and that's tough. That's a really tough one. If that ends up happening that way.
That would be a fantastic matchup. You got two high utility damage dealers. And like Maneater's maybe a little bit more of a support. You don't think of him as much of a damage dealer, but as you mentioned, if you build him for damage, he hits really hard. They've both got a lot of utility in their kit, and I think they're both popular champions. I think Maneater is really a famous champion, right? He's just one of those champions that people know and want to pull, and when they do, they get really excited. I don't know if the excitement factor is quite as high for Royal Guard. When you pull a Maneater, you're like, yes, I finally got that Maneater. When you pull a Royal Guard, you're like, oh yeah, all right, that's good. I like that. But there is a difference between the two.
Yeah.
So if you had to give an edge to one, that doesn't mean, by the way, that Maneater's better. It just means, a void epic is more exciting sometimes than a non-void epic.
Yeah, no, I get you.
But which would you call in that matchup? Which do you think actually makes it through the Epic 8 and gets into the Final Four? If that is in fact the matchup that we see.
Oh man, I want to just leave 7 minutes of dead air so I can think that over. I think I'm leaning towards Maneater, but again, if it's the Royal Guard Maneater matchup, I would expect that to be close.
Yeah.
I would expect that to be a buzzer beater, if we throw in a basketball reference here. Yeah. Cutting it super close. But maybe, I don't know. Maneater, in the early game, mid game, you're going to use him a lot of places. But then once your account progresses, it's going to, narrow down. Whereas Royal Guard, I think, is going to be used in a plethora of teams throughout your account life. Yeah, I'm leaning towards Maneater on this, but I'm definitely torn.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Let's do this then. Let's say pick a dark horse. Not Maneater, not Royal Guard. If there is another champion in this quarter of the bracket who could shake things up and break the bracket kind of on a surprise run, who do you think that would be?
I think I might be underrating the number one Runekeeper, but I think the dark horse is Dark Kayle. Just because he's such a powerful poisoner. But see, then I would just say, if that's true, doesn't Royal Guard do a better job of that? Maybe not. I don't know. That's a tough one.
What we've been consistent.
I'd love to see Gala shock everyone. Let me just say that. I would not be unhappy if Gala just shocks the world and comes out of here and beats a bunch of people. That would make me happy. I would enjoy that.
Yeah, that would be fun, and it would be shocking, I think, to a lot of people, but it would be very cool. And I think there is, there are a lot of factors that go into the voting. Obviously, how accessible the champion is, so how many voters have actually played with that champion. We don't know what that's going to look like, but also the popularity of the champion. And sometimes that's based on the kit, but sometimes it can be based on the feel of the champion, what their animations look like, what their skills look like, what their body mechanics are. So when you look at a champion in this bracket, I love Ursula the Mourner. I think she looks super cool. I like her outfit. I like her stance. I like her skills. And I'm also sort of like a support and tank player. Those are the champions I gravitate towards naturally. That doesn't mean I think she's supposed to come out of this side. But when I'm voting, sometimes I might just vote with my heart and not necessarily with my head. You know, so we also have that factor coming in. So I'm really interested in seeing how the Northeast region shakes out.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I'm really looking forward to filling out my own bracket. Guys, make sure you get involved here because this is so much fun. And Cole Red and Son have put in so much effort here. So just get involved. You will enjoy it too.
Thank you for the nice transition, the intro there. After this video drops, the brackets will be live. So MTG will have his predictions in. I will have my predictions in. All the analysts will have their predictions in. And now you can get your prediction. So all you got to do is click the link in the description of this video to find the bracket. It will also be available through my Discord community. So you can come to the Discord and find it there as well. And then you can fill out your own bracket. Those brackets will remain open until Monday at midnight. So you can change your votes all the time. You can talk to other people. You can see other people's brackets. Those brackets up here will be available for you to peruse. And maybe that'll help you make your picks. And then remember, at the end of all of this, we're going to have prizes for the winners. And we're going to have a little bit of a reveal for the prizes. So watch out for that as well. Subscribe to the channel so you can get notifications for all of these videos. Well, MTG, I'm excited to have you here, a basketball bracket guy. I've been working with like YST and HH, who are super fun, but they have no idea what March Madness is because, you know, they're from across the pond. And so it's great to have another March Madness enthusiast here. Thanks so much for joining.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, that is it for us today. Definitely check out MTG's channel. I'll provide a link for that as well. And hopefully we'll get to do a video over on his channel in the coming week or so. And so watch for that as well. All right, thanks so much. I have been Cole Red, and we will see you in another video soon.